everybody. Welcome back to the Dr. Greg Jones Optimization Academy, where I interview some of my favorite innovators in medicine, health, and fitness. Not just medicine. I've already made that update. We're expanding, we're growing this thing. And today's guest is Nathan Kohlerman. So, Nate, this is my first time actually talking to Nate, and that's okay. But I've been following his journey on social media for a while. We have a mutual friend who was like, hey, you got to meet my friend Nate. And I was like, oh, I'm down. And then, I started, checking out your website and the things that you're doing and things that the way you're trying to impact the world. And I was like, man, this would be you're the first non-medical guest, non-doctor guest on the show. So that's pretty big, man. You know what I'm saying? That's to me, I'm like, okay, let's blow it out. And here's a guy who's doing amazing things. So I'm excited to have you here. So I'm going to talk about your bio a little bit, and then we're going to turn it over and you can fill in the gaps that I'm going to miss. So back in August 2010, happy Veterans Day, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. You're welcome. Nathan enlisted in the military. What branch were you in?
I was in the Army.
Okay, Army. Okay, wait, HUA, right? HUA?
Yeah, cool.
They're right. Yeah, exactly. They stuck me. I was Navy. They stuck me at Fort Bliss for 2 years, as banished me from San Diego for my penchant for having too much fun. And then they were like, let's send this guy to El Paso. We'll show him. But that's another story for another day. So anyway, August 2010, Nate enlisted in the military in the Army. He served honorably for 5.5 years, and before being medically discharged for, and this is impressive, bilateral exertional compartment syndrome. And that's rough, man. So we definitely want to talk about that and your journey in recovering from that. And so his modern day fitness journey really began in 2011 while you were stationed in Suwon, South Korea. So after 2 years of consistently working out 5-6 days a week, he decided to go into bodybuilding. So 3-year journey with that, 6 shows altogether. Looks like you became a men's beach body professional, and that's with the GBO or Global Bodybuilding Organization. And then you also reached the national level with the NPC, which is awesome in itself. And then in March 2017, you tore 4 tendons. You tore 4 tendons and severed your radial artery and median nerve, which is impressive as hell. So first the legs and then the wrist. And we're going to talk about that as well. And then at the hospital, they revealed that you had severe liver toxicity and an acute was it rhabdo?
No, it is the acute kidney injury. That was all from steroid use, which we'll dive into.
Definitely. And that's because, again, the lifestyle and choices to pursue bodybuilding, and definitely something we want to talk about for some of our listeners as well. So after this injury and this wake-up call, Nathan used his countless investments in personal growth and continuing education to found New Intention Health and Wellness, whose mission is to educate, empower, and inspire others to take their health into their own hands and to redefine human optimization through mind, body, and soul. So these are some amazing topics that we're going to get into. And so that being said, Nate, I want you to go ahead and kind of clean up the bang-up job I did on your bio.
Well, thank you, man. No, you covered some amazing points there. And first and foremost, it's an honor to be the first non-medical guest. I think it's really powerful when the health and medical side can reach the health and the wellness side, and two should, in reality, it should be the same, but for some reason, in society, whether it be, social standards or whether it be for financial purposes, they've kind of differentiated and separated us. So again, one other means of division that we're seeing in today's society, I'm glad that we can bring in a state of unification to help, again, kind of bring people together, and that's really important and powerful. So thank you.
Oh, sure.
So yeah, I mean, growing up, I was always an athlete. I was a mixed martial artist from 5 years old to about 16. And, I dabbled in a couple of sports. I was a baseball player, football player, wrestler, pretty good for the most part, all very heavy physical contact sports. And, I started going down a slippery slope after my parents divorced and I stopped participating in martial arts. I got really bad into drugs, at the furthest end being heroin. And that's actually what really inspired me to go into the military. So when I became sober, I enlisted in the military, served 5.5 years, got into bodybuilding while I was serving actually. And I was about 3 years into my fitness journey, stepped on stage for the first time, November 2014, placed third. And it was the one thing that was consistent in my life. It was the one thing that was teaching me discipline outside of the military. But instead of somebody telling me what to do all the time, it was the first time that I actually felt empowered to make my own choices, to do the things that I wanted to do, and the things that I was passionate about in order to pursue. And kind of fast forwarding through that, throughout my military career, you know, I attained my sergeant in about 2.5 years, which is incredibly quick for the most part. And, you know, I became a leader, and I wanted to lead soldiers to a different capacity. So I started looking into wanting to train for special forces. So I was training for that. I was bodybuilding, and essentially I just pushed my body so hard that it just collapsed, really. And the bilateral exertional compartment syndrome was the first key to that. And it was quite painful. You know, I was a brigade commander's driver and gunner, so I would run with the colors, you know, anywhere upwards to 10 to 15 miles on these runs. And about half a mile to a mile in, my legs would go numb. It felt like shin splints on steroids. It was one of the most atrocious things that I could actually imagine happening while you're trying to work out and you're trying to become physically fit. And mentally and emotionally, it kind of crippled me and in my confidence. So they sent me to physical therapy and all these different things that, you know, helped to a certain extent, you know, but, you know, sitting there rubbing me with an ultrasound and some lubricant and, you know, giving me a little massage, it really didn't help the issue enough to prevent it any further. And they basically gave me an ultimatum: hey, you either get a fasciotomy and you get cut open, or, you know, you're not really battle ready, so we're gonna have to discharge you. And being 23, 24 at the time, I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna get surgery at 23 years old, 24 years old. There's no reason for this. And by that time, I had started looking into personal training as an alternate career, because I didn't have a degree at the time. I had a high school diploma and a few years of fitness under my belt and competing. So, you know, I figured it'd be an easy and smooth transition with the foundation of physical fitness and the discipline that I got from the military. So fast forward to that, got medically discharged, and I dove super heavy into bodybuilding. I started using steroids like crazy. I was on about 5 different steroids, 2 to 3 different peptides, as well as growth hormone by the age of, you know, 24. So at the peak of my bodybuilding, I ended up getting my pro card in February 2016, right before I got discharged, actually. And then I transitioned from like beach body and physique into heavyweight bodybuilding. And at my highest, I was 253 pounds, running at about anywhere from 5 to 6% body fat year round. And I was massive, absolutely massive. So getting ready to go to nationals for heavyweight bodybuilding for the NPC, trying to become an IFBB professional bodybuilder. One day I was leaning on the granite counter at the gym that I was working at, and it was installed improperly. The overhang was far too long without any support. So when my 253-pound big ass leaned on it, it snapped off, and it essentially gashed my hand open, and it tore 4 tendons, severed my radial artery, my median nerve. And I went to the hospital next day. I got 2 days of surgery back to back, and went through 6 to 7 months of rehab for my hand. You know, and by that time, I was still very heavily invested in personal training. I actually was a corrective exercise specialist through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. That's really what I wanted to pursue, was, you know, helping people heal and correct the injuries because of my disabilities from the military. And just to add on another injury on top of that was pretty debilitating. And, you know, that's when it really started affecting me more mentally and emotionally more than anything. You know, through this rehabilitation process, being a bodybuilder, 253 pounds, not even able to like brush his teeth or sit on the floor and play with his kid, like it was atrocious. Like it was just painful, you know, just from a mental standpoint, being so big and so strong, but like I can't even brush my teeth. I can't even take care of my kid. Like I felt useless. I felt powerless, and I lost this like powerful identity, or this mask that I wore for so long. And you know, throughout my youth, I had some problems with suicidal ideation and some other, you know, depressive disorders and, you know, anxiety and all these things, just from my upbringing and my childhood and trauma and all these things that come with it. So having these dark thoughts kind of creep back in really started also pushing me on the path of personal development and understanding why I thought the things that I did, why I felt the things that I did. And my healing journey began again, just not so much in the physical realm this time, but more so the mental, emotional, and the spiritual realm. and not like spiritual from a place of religion or derived from any standpoint of, a church or a foundation or a society that is quite, quite frankly, put in a box a lot of the times, but really so just having my own inward experience and my own journey on walking the path of why am I here on this earth. So after that injury, going through rehab, stepping into personal development and being able to try to heal myself just mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, it brought me to a place of starting my own brand. And this was after the lawsuit, and I got a settlement, and this, that, and the third. And that's how I created New Intention. And I really wanted to pursue helping people heal. And it started out very physically. And throughout this personal development journey and this wanting to help others heal, I dove into a lot of different trainings, a lot of different modalities, some of the primary modalities being DNS, or dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, which is essentially a neuromuscular rehabilitation technique that they use quite often in chiropractics and physical therapy to stabilize chiropractic adjustments, that is derived from developmental kinesiology to help retrain the primitive movement patterns that we learned from birth until about 13 months, moving through our motor control development. And from there, I started diving into end range joint training and functional movement assessments and functional range assessments to identify functional passive and active ranges of motion, and being able to put these tools together to essentially help optimize human movement. And that was a huge thing for me, just from bodybuilding and recreational powerlifting, and going into corrective exercise. Movement was my medicine for a really long time. But after my hand, I discovered animal flow. And that was probably one of the most impactful practices, because it wasn't quite yoga and it wasn't quite just straight bodyweight calisthenics training. It was a little bit of both. And I found a very masculine and feminine practice through that, being able to have grace and being able to have fluidity, being able to have, again, just feeling into every single movement, but then having a structure to develop force, to develop power, to develop an even rigorous practice of discipline for myself again. And it was the first thing that I found that really gave me that feeling of almost like the discipline behind martial arts, especially the movements as well, because it feels very much like wrestling and jujitsu, and it is used with, a lot of mixed martial arts athletes mixed with all the other things that I do. And then there came a day where, I was performing an assessment. I was trying to do some DNS on someone. I was trying to do some FRC on someone. I was trying to give him all the tools in my toolbox to help him out of pain. And a little backstory is that he, had some pretty serious trauma. He was in the military as well, and he had gone through quite the life journey that got him to my table. And he had a pretty bad case of fibromyalgia. And no matter what I did for him, nothing worked. And it really brought me to a place of humility and understanding that not everything is in the physical. So I started doing breath work with him. I started incorporating different mindfulness practices for him. I started referring him to other, therapists who could help him to this extent, and checking back later with him. That's exactly what he needed to really get out of pain, is seeing how emotional issues get stored in the tissues, and how, psychosomatic symptoms from trauma really influence the body to that capacity. And I started diving into that then. So now, being where I'm at with New Intention, it is, again, a soul practice, but it is now something that I will be developing my own method for. You really curating this multi-dimensional approach to optimizing the human experience, and using more than just the physical, but incorporating the mind, incorporating the body, incorporating the soul. And essentially that consists of different techniques through neurolinguistics programming, rewiring the subconscious mind, looking at belief systems, thought patterns, and unwanted behaviors, and then going into meditation and spiritual practices and mindfulness practices, combined with personal training and movement and holistic health and nutrition. But then also from a place of, really helping the soul heal as well. It's looking at the trauma, not just from this lifetime, but past lifetimes. And I'm a gateway heart healing practitioner as well. So bringing in another modality, another method, another set of principles to help people understand that spirit and source can come in and perform the healing for you. You just have to be open to receive, and using breath work and a specific practice with a practitioner who's able to do so can create the safe container for that person to surrender whatever it is they're hurting from, whatever it is they're suffering from, and then they can give it to a higher power. They can give it to source, and spirit, source, God, whatever you want to call it, can come in and perform the healing for you for the things that are known, the things that are unknown, and heal all things through Christ consciousness and unconditional love, and being able to help that person also embody that and carry that forward in their journey and on their path to recovery and their health.
Okay. And there's so much to unpack there with that story. And I'll kind of, we're going to kind of bring it around with that, because one thing that you mentioned, there's quite a few things that you mentioned that we're like, okay, I want to talk more about that. And I think the first thing I would start with is the trauma aspect, right? Because that is something that, I did not understand until I went through my own journey to actually confront my trauma, and by confronting it, it means like, okay, like revisiting it, right? Like talking about it, having that discussion, with whether a therapist and, not just a therapist, people that you can trust and talk about and say, hey, these are things that happened to me. And you don't realize until you get into it how much that trauma literally drives your decision trees as an adult, especially the trauma that you experience as a child, and a lot of times, especially as men, we are taught to suppress that, suppress the trauma, rub some dirt on a kid, keep going, kind of thing. And this comes to emotions as well. And so I think that is such a powerful point that you made about how do we, don't let the trauma control you, learn how to control it and learn the lesson from it and how to grow from that. And that's so important to, we talk about optimizing our health, optimizing our future. That's such a big part of it. It's almost like an underrated part of it. It's just addressing that trauma, coming face to face with it. Because if you don't, and I've been experiencing this a lot in my own personal life lately, is that if you don't address it, like truly address it, it's going to blow up. It's a ticking time bomb, and that's super important. So I'm really glad that you brought that up as well. The second thing I was going to ask you about, you were talking about the DNS, unless that was it dynamic neuromuscular stabilization.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how does that, or can that benefit someone who is not recovering from an injury, who is trying to optimize their performance or their health or their mobility?
Yeah, 100%. It is quite often used in sports. I mean, it is really more of a sports rehabilitation technique more than anything else, but can be used in more of an orthopedic or rehabilitation environment. So a lot of what it works with is the developmental movement patterns. If you ever look at a UFC fighter, for instance, and they're on their back and they're in a supine position, they're going to need to know how to stabilize in that position. If they are in a guard and they're trying to move into a mount, if they're in a deep squat or a tall kneeling or whatever the case may be, they need to know how to stabilize in these different positions. And quite often we use these developmental positions and these transitions to incorporate into our training, but normally we don't really think of it. So if we can start using these tools to start optimizing different positions and transitions within the human movement cycle, then it can carry over into sports. And then you can also factor in different sport specific training. Specifically me, I work with a lot of rotational athletes, specifically golfers, but I've even used this technique with a couple of NFL players as well. And it does help them stabilize in these positions and essentially rewire the brain's ability to communicate with how we stabilize through movement.
Okay, very cool, very cool. That was one thing I wanted to bring up. The other thing that we talked about, or you mentioned a little while back, was animal flow, right? So for those of us, including myself, who are not familiar with that, tell me a little bit more about what that is, because it sounded like you were going more with yoga, then there was some other parts to it, and I was like, wait a minute, we got to talk about that. So let's kind of unpack that a little bit. Talk to me a little bit more about the animal flow.
Yeah, so animal flow, again, it is my primary practice and what I use almost every single day in some capacity, whether it's with my clients or myself. And essentially, animal flow is a movement system composed of what most would call primal movements, and using these primal movements that are derived from animals, whether it's an ape, a beast, a crab, a scorpion, a crocodile. We start using these specific animal forms, let's call them, to build a sequence of movements and to build flows and to build more dynamic and progressive exercise sequences is the only way I can really explain it to it, that you can curate and start tying them together. So just like you go through a vinyasa flow and you can go into a warrior A, and then you start going into a humble warrior, and then you start going into tree pose, and then you go into chaturanga, right? Animal flow is built the same way, to where you can start tying in different movements together. But the main benefit of animal flow is that it's built off of the myofascial anatomy system. So everything that it is used in animal flow is basically in result to help balance the integrity system of the body. So being able to tie in the oblique slings, being able to tie in the deep front line and the arm lines. And again, it is more of a fluid practice, but it is a body weight system. So it incorporates different aspects of yoga, capoeira, of breakdancing even, and calisthenics. And you start tying all these things together, and it becomes a beautiful practice to enhance your flexibility, your mobility, your stability, your strength, and your power, just depending on how you use it. And one of the main principles that I teach when I teach classes or even one-on-one is that your tempo reflects your tenacity. And I implement this with my men's groups that I run, because I help them tap into their bodies and how to get out of their head and into their body. As you know, men, we're very much in our head, but to get into our bodies and to identify how we're feeling, and then to move as though we're feeling, but then also being able to shift our emotional and our energetic states by using our tool as the vehicle that allows us to do that.
Awesome. So I'm going to look more into that. I have not heard about that. It sounds pretty damn cool, to be very, very honest with you. And just to get that, I feel like there's a lot of release with it. Is that something that you see with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, whether it's physical release, I've even had a couple women that have practiced with me having some pretty intense emotional releases as well, because them just feeling the struggle with their body, but then also feeling that certain blockages through their body and through their energy centers are actually unlocked in the process. And that is why it again it extends much further beyond the physical with this practice. But yeah, I mean, you're local, so let's get it in, man. I'd be happy to teach you some of that.
I gotta find what my animal is gonna be, man. I'm kind of digging a scorpion. I'm digging a scorpion, man. So hopefully I still have the flexibility to make that happen. So something we talked about when we were, kind of chatting on Instagram about this is that with your experience in the bodybuilding world, and now you're on a different aspect of health and fitness, right? And this is something, my journey in I used to compete in physique and all that stuff, and I got some trophies gathering dust in the back of the house somewhere, and all that stuff. But one thing that I noticed as I transitioned out of that world into being a physician is that I felt like there's health, there's fitness, there's aesthetics, and they're different. Because what you can have someone who's very fit, very active, but they're doing very unhealthy things. Where you can have someone who's extremely healthy, but maybe they don't move and they're not active, so they're not exactly fit. And then you may have someone on the other end of the spectrum where they look incredible, low body fat, all that, but they're, and your personal experience, but they're not healthy at all. It's just one little thing when it comes to, physiological processes. So I would love to hear your take.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. So again, I think all of them do fall into line with one another for sure. They're all very correlated and parallel to one another in a sense. But when you start looking at how they're inversely related, you're totally right when you say that, somebody who's healthy may not be fit. Somebody who's fit may not be aesthetic. Somebody who's aesthetic may not be healthy. And it's this like paradigm that where a lot of the issue is there's no clear communication or education on what does healthy mean, right? And I think that is based upon an individual's, perception of what healthy could be or should be. And, labs and results and all those things, they show, right? If you're healthy, do you take care of your body? Do you actually manage your stress well? Do you drink enough water? Like, are you a normal functioning human being? Or do you trash it, right? Just like you said, somebody can be fit, but they may not eat right, or they may just have the genetic disposition to look a certain way. And that's a lot of it too. And with bodybuilding in the aesthetic world, that is 100%, not really aligned with health. I don't think that aligns at all. Just because you look good doesn't mean you're actually healthy. I mean, for Christ's sake, I was 253 pounds at, 4 to 6% body fat, but I had severe liver toxicity and acute kidney injury from taking multiple different compounds that quite frankly didn't belong in my body, because my body was already providing me with what it should have been. Like, I was 24, 25 years old. There's no reason that I needed any of that. And, you know, I would have these refeeds or these cheat meals every Saturday, which then essentially just threw my body into like these weird chaotic loops. And I'm sure there's some physiological benefit when it comes to aesthetics, or how the mitochondrial production is, or how the insulin reacts to the glucose that you're taking in, and all those things. But at the end of the day, it didn't really benefit my mental and emotional health, because while I was bodybuilding and I was having cheat meals and donuts on Wednesday or Rice Krispies before I work out, like all this bro logic on how to build muscle, you know, I fell into a really deep slump of depression as well. Like, I wasn't mentally healthy. I wasn't emotionally healthy, because I would eat so much. I would feel so guilty, and I would throw up, and I would eat again, and I would throw up. And I had a slight case of bulimia as a bodybuilder. Like, I was bulimic. Like, I would force myself to throw up from guilt or shame or any type of emotional issue that I was facing. So I wasn't healthy. I wasn't physically healthy from a visceral level, from an organ level. I wasn't mentally or emotionally healthy. So just because I had an 8-pack and I looked pretty good posing on stage, I was not healthy whatsoever. And I couldn't even sit on the ground and play with my kid. I couldn't move well at all. So how can I say I was fit, or I was athletic, or I had this lifestyle, when I couldn't even go out and throw a ball if I wanted to, let alone scratch my back? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think the correlation between all those things is, again, the misinformation and the education behind it. And again, like, I don't think the bodybuilding or the aesthetics world would be having this issue if a lot of the coaches were educated enough to give proper guidance, you know. And guaranteed there are plenty of coaches who are educated well, and there are some who have great coaches and everything else. But when you look at, you know, normal Joe Schmo at the gym down the street, who's telling his bodybuilder to take 100 milligrams of test, tren, and Masteron, when he has no foundational knowledge at all in biology or chemistry, biochemistry, or even medicine, for instance, or hormonal or functional medicine. Like, why do you think that you're able to do that? You know, because you don't understand really what's happening at that level. And very rarely do you see competitors who are getting their blood tested regularly and having it checked by a physician, and then a physician telling them how to do that. Because then again, that kind of crosses the lines of insurance and medicine, to where it's like, well, they can't legally tell you what to run or how much to run unless it's part of a treatment plan, unless it's part of certain levels that are seen on the reports. So a lot of it is convoluted. And again, I just don't think they have the proper resources nor the education to be, you know, telling a lot of these people in the industry. And unfortunately, you see a lot of young bodybuilders who are dying, like Dallas McCarver, 24, 25 years old, died of a heart attack.
Sad.
You know, and you know, he had a physician and a team and everything else. And I don't think that there's even a clear guidance on these things, because everybody's body is different. You can't just, you know, pump it in one guy and be like, oh, this method worked.
Yeah, this is
another, like
the protocol per se, you know. And it's a challenge, you know, overall, because they're, you know, and we both competed, and there is some beauty in the discipline it takes to do these things, right? And to see where your body can do and what you can accomplish. But you're right, there's that line where it's like, okay, I'm crossing out of that line of, like, this is going to cause me long-term damage for those 60 seconds on the stage, you know. And that's scary, because it's a lot, the time and investment that you're spending to get there. Are you also going to spend that time to get yourself back to a healthy level? And you know, that's just you know, it's more philosophical in its own way. But you know, my perspective now that I, you know, as a doctor, it's like, you know, it's like, okay, what I'm gonna say is like, okay, you know, get healthy, fitness follows health, aesthetics follows health and fitness, you know. And that's just kind of the way it is, you know. And then it becomes, okay, what is your goal, right? Because if your goal is just looking good, that's awesome. But at the same time, you know, how are you going, you know, I look at it like, how are you going to feel when you're 60, when you're 70, when you're 80? What's the long-term ramifications of the things you're doing? And just knowing that, you know, like you said, do you want to be able to play with your grandkids? You know, do you want to not spend an enormous amount of money, a ridiculous amount of money on hospital bills when you're older, because you ignored all these super important factors of health that, and, you know, especially as a naturopath, like, numbers are great and you want to see healthy numbers, but understand that everyone's different. And some people, their normal is not the lab values normal. So just understanding that. And that's where the education piece comes into it, and make sure you have a doc that understands, functional medicine and how to interpret labs, and, what to do to make sure that person is getting to the right direction. Something to go into now, because we do love talking about optimization on this podcast. And this is something we talked about earlier that I really thought was cool about, with one of the missions of New Intention, is optimizing human performance, or the human condition, with mind, body, and soul. This is a great question. This is a good thing to jump into, because body's, I don't say it's not easy, but we all understand body, right? Optimizing function, whether it be optimizing your hormones, optimizing your strength and your conditioning and all that. So I don't, that's a different podcast, different time. I really want to dive into, what the New Intention method is, or the philosophy for optimizing the human condition through the mind and the soul.
Right. So again, it again is the entirety of the optimization, right? So if I have somebody who schedules a discovery call with me, because I screen and talk to everybody who I work with, and my belief and my system for this is that everybody deserves an individualized roadmap, right? So if they're coming in and they know what they want, where it could be, hey, I want a movement assessment, or I want a functional range assessment. I had this really bad shoulder injury. This is that and the third. Okay, we're going to go down that route. And through building the relationship, chances are we're going to have a conversation about these other principles, to where, okay, well, there's probably some emotional trauma stored in there. There's probably some, mental block here that's limiting their potential of actually doing the work and their consistency. Are they keeping up with the work? What is the mental block behind the work? So I do bring more of the mindset coaching behind it as well, and the behavioral coaching if it's associated. And, if I get on the phone with somebody and, people will contact me for life coaching or men's coaching or breath work, or a lot of these modalities that I use. So, people specifically know me, to where New Intention is the brand, but the approach itself is the mission, right? It's the mission, and it's the individualized preparation and integration for these people one by one. And not saying that there is a certain system or a cut and paste for anyone, a copy and paste for anyone, but it's based on what they're sharing with their experience with me, what route I'm going to take. And a lot of the times people will already kind of know why they're calling, but maybe they don't. Let's say they don't. And they just have the energy, and they just feel the energy and felt to call me, and they just started telling me their story and telling me these things. I can see through a lot of that, and I can see exactly what might be the issue, right? Do you have a lack of connection to spirit? Do you have a lack of connection to source? Do you have a lack of connection to self, right? How are your behaviors showing that, right? How are you seeking safety and security? Do you have a solid foundation with yourself? And if not, how can we start reestablishing safety and security by finding more identification of self once again? And what are certain practices that we can implement that'll help you on your journey, help you on your path, more than just being a trainer or giving you a diet plan or just talking to you and giving you something to go move with, right? Because if there's a mental, emotional block or a spiritual block, even more so energetically, you look at the energetic undercurrent of that, and the program will not be successful. So really looking at it from a multifaceted approach and using the tools in my toolbox to help guide them on their journey through that. Whether I use NLP techniques, whether I use certain trigger therapy techniques, whether I use quantum timeline healing to have them go back into their past to reframe a belief, to find a positive resource through a negative experience, or to take them through breath work for a somatic release experience, or have them ground every day, just so that way they can start again attuning their electromagnetic frequency to the one of the earth. They can feel grounded, they can feel stable. It is going to be completely dependent upon what their issue is, what their struggle is, what their pain is. And that's the method. It's an individualized coaching process to help someone, again, take their health into their own hands. And it is an individualized roadmap, just like addiction, right? Addiction, not all recovery centers have a 100% cure rate of addiction, right? Not all 12-step programs can help people through the addiction process quite fully, but everybody deserves an individualized roadmap to recovery. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do with the people who I serve with New Intention.
That's awesome. And I wholeheartedly appreciate that and support that, because, when it comes to, that's one thing we learned about naturopathic medicine, man. It's individualized and everyone's different. There is no cookie cutter approach. And it's just like, what is the right plan for the right person, you know, and at the right time as well, because that plan can change. It may not be set in stone for, you know, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months to a year. It's, you know, we change with you, we develop with you as you progress, you know, progress down your journey to health and fitness as well. And so that's super incredible. And I like the fact that, you know, and we're talking earlier, it's like, you know, sometimes I feel like I find myself when I think about optimization, it's so easy do the sexy stuff, right? Here's peptides, here's a you know, balancing your hormones, here's some cellular medicine stuff, here's some, you know, some anti-senescence things, and we can go down the list of all these things to, you know, improve ATP and NAD and they're, you know, all the cool things. But sometimes I think it's important to step back and just get to foundation. You know, what's the obstacle, what's that obstacle within you that's preventing you from getting to the next level in your life. So I think this is really cool, and it helps me, you know, you know, some things, this type of conversation helps me be a better doctor, you know, a better physician for people, because I'm not just, you know, I don't get that tunnel vision where I'm just like, okay, I'm just looking at numbers and I'm looking at all these different markers, where there's a little bit more and understanding. Some people do need a little bit more, and to think outside of the box to get them optimized and feeling their best and to move forward in their life. So that is super duper duper cool. Well, man, this is great. Awesome. But I feel like, as we said back then, my dime's almost up, man. My minutes on this phone are almost up, man, or and all that stuff. We're back in the day. Show you my age, man. We used to be on the payphone, and you know, you're like 12 years old, you're talking to some girl on the phone, and they cut in and tell you that this call is about to get cut off.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Oh, I thought you were at home. I was like, yeah, this payphone thing we got set up here is quite amazing. So, Adil, before we let you go, you know, Nate, first of all, let us know where to find you. We'll start with that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Drern. Thank you so much for having me on. But people can find me through any social channels, just by my name, at Nathan Kohlerman. They can go check out the new Intention website, which is about to be redone. It is www.neuintention.com. And then they can also find me and the work that I'm doing with men specifically at www.houseofomega.com.
Okay. And you are taking new clients and new.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Specifically awesome. Around, again, the entire optimization process, not just from a personal training or health, but an individualized roadmap to their health, their wellness, and their optimization.
Okay. Well, awesome, man. Thank you again. I really appreciate you coming on today. You know, everyone, reach out to Nathan, follow on Instagram, follow him on social media channels, and you know, check out the website. And if you're looking to, you know, take your optimization to another level, this is a person that can help you get there. You know, and just open your mind, man. Open your mind, open your spirits, open your hearts, and then be able to find different ways to achieve the goals you want to achieve, everyone. So thanks again. If you have, you know, leave on the YouTube channel, leave your comments, your questions, your concerns. We'll make sure we get back to you ASAP. This will be on all the podcast networks here in a few weeks. And so we'll keep growing this thing, man. So once again, I appreciate it. Happy Veterans Day once again, man. And we'll be talking to you soon.